Yes, my lady. Couples could agree what property each owned before marriage, and that would make splitting assets after a divorce easier. This would be under new proposals by the Law Commission. Now, all of this follows a case and a victory by a German heiress, Katrin Radmacher, who held on to £100 million after a prenup was found to be legally binding by the Supreme Court. Our solicitor, Ayesha Vardag, is in our central London studio to tell us more about this. How do you see this developing? How will things change with this?
This is a huge step forward. There's obviously been a lot happening on this over the past few years. I acted for Katrin Radmacher in the Supreme Court, and what we were trying to achieve there was a recognition of the autonomy of individuals to agree their own affairs and then be held to their bargain.
Yes.
What the upshot of that was is that, sweeping aside years of the idea that prenuptial agreements were against public policy because they contemplated divorce, there's a recognition that people do divorce, and that if they've agreed what they're going to do, they should be held to that agreement unless it's manifestly unfair. That was what we achieved there. What the Law Commission has done now is tried to work out how to expand that into legislation and take it a step further. Because where we are after Radmacher, it's the prenup will stick unless it's unfair, but the courts still have jurisdiction. What the Law Commission is looking at is what parameters you might have that would enable agreement to stick even without the court's intervention, ousting the court's jurisdiction completely. So you'd have something that would be watertight in certain circumstances, and what you'd need to make something like that work, what something like that would look like.
But here's the question. It doesn't work then so much for the partner who goes into a marriage with lesser assets, which probably by and large mostly may well be the woman, and then they become used to it's a lifestyle which they get used to. Is that fair then? How could you make out, if you entered into the relationship with very little, how would you leave then with a lot under a prenup?
The idea is that you know what you're doing. People are not forced to marry. They go into this voluntarily. And if they go in with their eyes open and the basis for their marriage is something that they've worked out between them, the idea is that they should be held to that. Now, what the Law Commission's trying to do is look at what's fair. Obviously, over a very long marriage, when things have changed and assets have been built up between the parties, then it may not be fair, without the court's capacity to intervene, to make a prenup binding, so that one party goes off with all the wealth that they've built up together as a partnership because of the prenup that was set up long ago. The Law Commission's looking at things like, well, maybe it should only apply to pre-acquired assets, the way you have in some continental regimes, whereby pre-acquired property from before the marriage is excluded, but property that you have during the marriage you end up sharing. They're looking at different ways of working this out. I mean, this is a work in progress and a consultation paper whereby they're trying to see what's going to work, but it's a huge step forward for enabling people to just sort things out between them. It costs potentially hundreds of thousands to go through the courts. It's miserable, it's exhausting, it's traumatic for families. If they can work things out for themselves and get out of that, it's a huge step forward.
But the people who might be really against this are your colleagues, other legal eagles. They're the ones, I know from my own experience, I mean, it costs a lot.
All industries have to adapt. You don't go forward by trying to hold things back. If people need prenuptial agreements, then we'll have to develop the ultimate prenuptial agreements that are really going to work. And it's just going to become a more consensual business to some extent, which would be a great thing.
Final question, just a quick question as well. I know a lot of people will be watching and they'll be saying, yeah, but we're not married, we live together and we maybe have children, or, you know, we're in a long-term relationship. Can you have a sort of prenup equivalent if you're not actually legally married?
Absolutely. You can work out cohabitation agreements. the idea is partly that there are a lot of people who feel they can't marry because of the vulnerability that the marriage laws put on in relation to their assets. The idea is that some of those people will actually be able to get married and with a feeling of safety if they can have prenuptial agreements that are going to work for them. But even if they're choosing not to, yes, they can still have agreements in place between them.
Thank you. That's the prenup lawyer, Ayesha Vardag. Ayesha, thank you very much indeed. Sky News Sunrise, it is a Tuesday morning. Thank you for your company. Website, it is skynews.com. The rapper has been asked to help BAFTA with her